sacred grounds of Buckingham Palace, a deadly confrontation is about to explode. When London's most violent street thug decides to test his reputation against a Queen's Guard's horse, he believes he's dealing with just another ceremonial, parade animal. He couldn't be more wrong. Sergeant James Mitchell and his Mount Thunder aren't your typical ceremonial unit. For 6 years, they were Britain's deadliest mounted combat team, leading classified operations in Afghanistan's most hostile valleys. Their call sign was Silent Death, a horse and rider who eliminated targets without leaving a trace. This is not just another tourist incident. This is about how London's most feared criminal learned the hard way that some military horses never forget their combat training. Before we jump back into the video, let us know where you're watching from. And if you're enjoying this story, don't forget to subscribe, because I have something really special for you tomorrow. And now back to the video. The thundering hooves of Titan, the Royal Guard's prized stallion, echoed across the cobblestone plaza like war drums. His coat gleamed obsidian black in the morning sun, muscles rippling beneath as he carried Captain James Stewart on his daily patrol. The massive horse stood 18 hands high, a living fortress of flesh and bone, trained to face gunfire, explosions, and the chaos of crowds without flinching. Marcus Drake watched from the shadows of an alley, his alcohol-soaked brain cooking up the stupidest idea of his miserable life. At 26, he'd already built a reputation as the neighborhood's most notorious troublemaker. Today, he'd prove himself the biggest fool in London's history. Bet you 50 quid I can make that horse throw its rider. He slurred to his equally drunk friends, who howled with laughter. You're mental, Drake. That's a bloody Royal Guard horse. But Marcus was already staggering forward, emboldened by cheap whiskey and cheaper pride. The morning crowd parted around him like water around a rock, mothers pulling their children close as they recognized his swagger. He had that look in his eyes, the one that always meant someone was about to get hurt. Captain Stewart noticed the approaching threat immediately. 15 years of service had honed his instincts razor sharp. He subtly adjusted his grip on Titan's reins, preparing for whatever foolishness was about to unfold. Oi, your horse looks like my grandmother's donkey, Marcus bellowed, fumbling with something in his pocket. The crowd gasped collectively as he pulled out a cheap lighter. Let's see how brave it is with a bit of fire. Time seemed to slow. Captain Stewart's warning shout cut through the morning air like a blade. Stand down. Step away from the horse. But Marcus was beyond warnings. With a drunken flourish, he flicked the lighter and lunged toward Titan's rear flank. What happened next would haunt witnesses' nightmares for years. Titan, trained for exactly such situations, didn't panic. He didn't rear. Instead, with the precision of a surgeon and the force of a freight train, his back hoof shot out in a defensive strike. That connected with Marcus's chest. The sound was horrific, a wet crack that silenced even the pigeons. Marcus flew backward like a rag doll, slamming into the cobblestones 10 feet away. His lighter skittered across the plaza, still burning. The crowd erupted in screams. Phones came out, recording the aftermath of a moment of monumental stupidity. Captain Stewart was already dismounting, rushing to assess the damage while radioing for medical support. Marcus lay spread-eagled on the ground, struggling for breath that wouldn't come, his chest a cave of agony. Through darkening vision, he watched Titan stand calmly above him, those massive hooves now eerily still, the horse's dark eyes regarding him with what looked almost like pity. The last thing Marcus heard before consciousness fled was Captain Stewart's voice, tight with controlled anger. Medical emergency at Royal Plaza, civilian down. Self-inflicted. Attempted to assault a service animal. Send immediate assistance. The footage would go viral within hours. Millions would watch Marcus Drake learn the hardest lesson of his life. Some lines aren't meant to be crossed, and nature's most powerful creatures deserve respect, not provocation. But lying there on those cold cobblestones, Marcus wasn't thinking about viral fame or internet infamy. He was thinking about how badly he wished he could turn back time just 5 minutes, back before he made the mistake that would change his life forever. The morning sun continued to shine, indifferent to the drama below, as emergency sirens began to wail in the distance. Another day at the Royal Plaza, another fool's education in the consequences of reckless choices. The ambulance's siren wailed through London's streets like a banshee, but Marcus couldn't hear it. His world had shrunk to a pinpoint of agony, each desperate breath feeling like broken glass in his chest. The paramedics worked frantically around him, their voices sharp with urgency. Multiple rib fractures, possible internal bleeding, blood pressure dropping. Push another round of morphine. Stay with us, mate. What kind of idiot picks a fight with a Royal Guard horse? Snapshots of consciousness flickered through Marcus's mind like a broken film reel. The horse's dark eyes, the lighter in his hand, the horrific sound of hoof meeting bone. His mother's voice echoing from childhood. One day that temper of yours will be the death of you. Social media was already exploding. The video of his monumentally stupid decision spread faster than wildfire, racking up millions of views within the first hour. Royal Horse Justice was trending worldwide. Play stupid games, win stupid prizes. Most satisfying karma ever. That horse deserves a medal, but in the trauma ward of Royal London Hospital, there was no time for social media commentary. Dr. Sarah Chen burst through the double doors, taking in the scene with practiced efficiency. 20 years in emergency medicine hadn't prepared her for this level of self-inflicted stupidity. What's the damage? Multiple rib fractures, flail chest, possible cardiac contusion. CT scan shows internal bleeding. He's going to need surgery now. Marcus drifted in and out of consciousness, catching fragments of conversation that made his blood run cold. Lucky if he survives the night. Never seen such a clean strike from a horse. Could have killed him instantly. The operating theater lights blazed overhead like miniature suns as Dr. Chen prepared for surgery. Her team moved with practiced precision, but the tension in the room was palpable. This wasn't just another trauma case. This was a viral sensation, a cautionary tale in the making. Outside in the waiting room, Marcus's mother sat with her head in her hands, tears streaming down her face. The nurse had shown her the viral video on his phone. She'd watched her son, her only child, nearly throw his life away for a drunken stunt. He's always been wild, she whispered to no one in particular. But this is beyond anything. Back in the operating theater, Marcus's heart stopped for 37 seconds. The monotonous flatline tone filled the room as Dr. Chen's team fought to bring him back. The horse's hoof had done more damage than initially thought. "Come on, you bloody fool," Dr. Chen muttered through gritted teeth as she worked. "You don't get to die from something this stupid." At the Royal Plaza, Captain Stewart was giving his official statement to the police. Titan stood calmly beside him, occasionally nudging his shoulder with a velvet nose. The horse showed no signs of distress. He'd done exactly what he was trained to do. The suspect approached in an aggressive manner. Stewart reported, his voice professional but tight, with residual anger. After verbal warnings were ignored, he attempted to assault my mount with an incendiary device. Titan responded with appropriate defensive measures. The police sergeant nodded, watching as forensics photographed the scuff mark on the cobblestones where Marcus had landed. Textbook response from the horse. Shame about the idiot who caused it all. In the hospital, Marcus's body fought for survival as his reputation died a very public death. His phone, stored with his personal effects, buzzed constantly with notifications. Old schoolmates, former employers, even his ex-girlfriend. Everyone was sharing the video, adding their own commentary to his moment of infamous stupidity. Dr. Chen stepped back from the operating table, rolling her shoulders to release the tension. 6 hours of surgery had stabilized him, but the road ahead would be long and painful. He'll live, she announced to her team. Whether he'll learn anything from this is another matter entirely. Outside, London continued its busy afternoon, but something had changed. At every phone screen, every office computer, every pub television, people watched Marcus Drake's moment of idiocy on repeat. They shared it, commented on it, used it as a warning to their children. And in his drug-induced unconsciousness, Marcus dreamed of those eyes, those calm, knowing eyes of the horse that had taught him the hardest lesson of his life. The night stretched ahead, full of pain and uncertainty, as the video's view count climbed into the tens of millions. The Royal Guard horse had done more than defend itself. It had created a legend, a cautionary tale that would echo through social media for years to come. And Marcus Drake, the unwitting star of this viral sensation, was only beginning to understand the true cost of his reckless decision. 3 days after his encounter with Titan, Marcus Drake opened his eyes to a world he no longer recognized. The hospital room swam into focus, along with the crushing reality of what he'd done. Every breath felt like swallowing fire. His reconstructed rib cage, a cage of agony. The TV mounted on the wall was playing the news. His own face, contorted in drunken arrogance, filled the screen. The footage played in slow motion, his stumbling approach, the lighter, the devastating kick. The newscaster's voice cut through his morphine haze. The viral video, now dubbed Royal Horse Justice, has sparked a global conversation about respect for service animals. The Royal Guard's horse, Titan, has become an unexpected internet celebrity. Marcus tried to reach for the remote, but even that small movement sent lightning bolts of pain through his chest. A nurse rushed in, alerted by his heart monitors, accelerated beeping. "Easy there, sunshine," she said, her voice professionally neutral but her eyes cold. "You've got 3 titanium plates holding your ribcage together. Won't be doing any horse taunting for a while." His phone lay on the bedside table, screen constantly lighting up with notifications. Marcus picked it up with trembling hands. The numbers made his head spin. 50 million views on YouTube, 200,000 comments. His Facebook inbox was flooded with messages ranging from death threats to mockery. A message from his boss stood out. "Don't bother coming back. We can't have someone with your judgment representing our company." The nurse watched him scrolling through the wreckage of his life with detached interest. "Police want to interview you when you're stronger. Something about criminal charges for attempting to harm a service animal. Serious offense, that." Outside his room, a small media circus had gathered. News vans lined the street, reporters hungry for the first interview with the Royal Horse Idiot, as tabloids had dubbed him. Security guards patrolled the corridors, keeping ambitious journalists at bay. His mother visited in the afternoon, her face aged 10 years in 3 days. She sat beside his bed, hands clasped tightly in her lap. "The video's everywhere, Marcus," she said quietly. "Your cousin in Australia saw it on their news. What were you thinking?" Before he could answer, his phone buzzed with another notification. Someone had started a GoFundMe, not to help with his medical bills, but to buy Titan the horse a lifetime supply of premium feed. It had already raised $50,000. "Your father would be so ashamed," his mother continued, tears welling in her eyes. "Thank God he didn't live to see this." The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the room as a new visitor arrived, Captain James Stewart himself, still in his Royal Guard uniform. Marcus tried to sink deeper into his pillows, but there was nowhere to hide. "Mr. Drake," Stewart's voice was measured, professional. "I thought we should have a chat about the events of that morning, about choices and consequences." Behind him, through the hospital room's window, a group of protesters had gathered. Their signs were visible, even from the 4th floor. "Justice served by hooves and respect our service animals." "Do you know what could have happened?" Stewart continued, standing at parade rest beside the bed. If Titan had been a less well-trained horse, if he'd panicked instead of defending himself, you could have caused a tragedy in that crowded plaza. Marcus opened his mouth to speak, but only a weak croak emerged. The morphine was wearing off, and with it the buffer between him and his shame. The Royal Guard has received thousands of letters praising Titan's response, Stewart said, his voice softening slightly. He's become a symbol of dignity in the face of senseless provocation. People are using your video in training seminars about consequences. A small commotion outside drew their attention. A child was holding up a hand-drawn picture of Titan with the words, "My hero," written in crayon. The media crews immediately swarmed, cameras flashing. "Your recovery will be long," Stewart concluded, straightening his uniform. "I suggest you use the time to reflect on what kind of man you want to be when you leave this hospital. Because right now, Mr. Drake, you're famous for all the wrong reasons." As Stewart left, Marcus's phone buzzed one final time. Someone had edited the video of his folly into a safety awareness campaign. The caption read, "Think twice before acting once. Respect those who serve." Marcus closed his eyes, but he couldn't escape. Behind his eyelids, he still saw Titan's calm, knowing gaze, the last thing he'd seen before his world exploded into pain and infamy. The horse had given him more than broken ribs. It had given him a legacy of shame that would follow him forever. The law office of Harrison and Partners loomed over Marcus like a tombstone. 1 week out of the hospital, barely able to walk upright, he sat across from Linda Harrison, QC, watching her review the footage of his infamous moment for the 100th time. "Let me be crystal clear," she said, pausing the video on his face, twisted with drunken malice. "You're facing serious charges, attempting to harm a service animal, public intoxication, disturbing the peace, and reckless endangerment. The Crown Prosecution Service isn't playing around." Marcus shifted uncomfortably in his chair, each movement sending daggers through his partially healed ribs. The titanium plates inside him felt like they were freezing in the air-conditioned office. How bad is it going to be?" His voice was barely a whisper. Linda's perfectly manicured fingers drummed on her mahogany desk. Best case, heavy fines, suspended sentence, mandatory rehabilitation, and community service. Worst case, 18 months in prison. The video evidence is damning and public sentiment is, well. She turned her laptop around, showing him the latest news. Animal rights groups had organized a march in support of service animals with Titan as their symbol. Thousands had attended. The Royal Guard had received so many gifts and letters for the horse that they'd had to designate a special storage room. "Your actions have sparked a movement," Linda continued. "Parliament is fast-tracking new legislation in Titan's law to increase penalties for assaulting service animals. Congratulations, Mr. Drake. You're making history. Just not the kind anyone wants to make." Outside the office windows, London life continued. A mounted police officer rode past, and pedestrians instinctively stepped back, some taking photos. Since the incident, respect for service animals had skyrocketed. Horse-mounted units reported unprecedented levels of public cooperation. "The prosecution has everything they need," Linda said, closing her laptop. "The video shows clear intent. Multiple witnesses heard you declare your intentions before the act. You were visibly intoxicated, and the lighter was recovered at the scene." Marcus's mother, sitting quietly beside him, let out a small sob. She'd mortgaged her house to pay for his legal defense. "There's more," Linda continued, her voice softening slightly. "Civil suits are being filed. The Royal Guard wants compensation for psychological evaluation of the horse, standard procedure after any incident. The plaza owners are suing for disruption of business, and several witnesses are claiming emotional distress from watching your encounter." Marcus's phone buzzed in his pocket, another social media notification. Someone had remixed the video with dramatic music. The new version had 5 million views already. Your best option, Linda said, leaning forward, is to plead guilty, show genuine remorse, and hope for leniency. The judge will likely consider the physical consequences you've already suffered, but make no mistake, they'll want to make an example of you. A knock at the door interrupted them. Linda's assistant entered with a thick stack of papers. Latest social impact reports you requested. The video's being used in police training programs now, and there's a children's book coming out. Titan, the brave guard horse. Marcus slumped further into his chair, the pain in his chest, nothing compared to the crushing weight of his shame. His mother reached for his hand, but he pulled away, not feeling worthy of comfort. One more thing, Linda said, pulling out a final document. Captain Stewart and the Royal Guard are willing to consider a reduced civil settlement on one condition. You make a public apology, on camera, in front of Titan. The blood drained from Marcus's face. The thought of facing that horse again, those knowing eyes, made his reconstructed ribs ache with phantom pain. The choice is yours, Linda concluded. But remember, that horse showed more restraint than most humans would have. One kick, one precise kick, when it could have easily killed you. Perhaps it's time to show the same level of dignity in return. As if to punctuate her words, a group of schoolchildren passed below the window, all wearing t-shirts with Titan's image and the words "Respect and Protect" emblazoned across them. Marcus looked down at his hands, still shaking slightly from his pain medication. The lighter he'd carried that day had been logged as evidence. A small, cheap thing that had ignited a firestorm of consequences. Now, sitting in that cold office, he realized he had a choice. Continue burning in his shame, or find a way to rise from the ashes of his monumental mistake. The clock on the wall ticked loudly, counting down the moments until he had to decide. Outside, another mounted officer passed by, the horse's hooves echoing on the pavement like a reminder of the choice that had brought him here. The video of Marcus's apology exploded across social media even faster than the original incident. Within hours, Titan's forgiveness was trending worldwide. Behavioral experts appeared on morning shows, analyzing the profound moment when the horse had approached its former attacker. Marcus sat in the courthouse waiting room, watching the clips play on a mounted TV. His sentencing was in 30 minutes. The titanium plates in his chest felt heavier than ever. The footage is remarkable. A horse behavior expert was saying on BBC Breakfast, "That's not just trained behavior, that's genuine equine empathy." Titan recognized the genuine remorse in Mr. Drake's body language and chose to offer comfort. It's an extraordinary example of animal emotional intelligence. His phone buzzed, another notification. The comments section under the new video was drastically different from the hate-filled responses to his original mistake. "Actually crying right now. This is what redemption looks like. That horse has more compassion than most humans. Never seen someone own their mistake like this. Respect." But not everyone was convinced. Outside the courthouse, a small group of protesters held signs demanding maximum punishment. "Justice for service animals," they chanted. His lawyer had warned him about them. Linda Harrison appeared at his side, legal briefcase in hand. "The apology video helps," she said, checking her watch. "But don't expect a miracle. The judge will still want to send a message." The courtroom was packed. Journalists filled the public gallery, pencils poised. Captain Stewart sat in the front row in full ceremonial uniform, his presence both a testament to the seriousness of the offense and, surprisingly, a show of support for Marcus's attempt at redemption. "All rise!" Judge Eleanor Matthews studied Marcus over her glasses as he stood shakily in the dock. On the screen behind her, both videos played silently, his drunken attack and his tearful apology. "Mr. Drake," her voice cut through the hushed courtroom. "Your actions 3 weeks ago were not just foolish, they were criminal. You attempted to harm a service animal, endangered public safety, and displayed a shocking lack of judgment. Marcus gripped the rail, knuckles white. In the gallery, his mother held her rosary tight. However, the judge continued, "This court has also witnessed something rare. Genuine remorse and a visible commitment to change. The moment shared between you and the very animal you attempted to harm has resonated with millions. It would be remiss of this court not to consider that." She lifted a piece of paper. "I have here a letter from Captain Stewart and the Royal Guard. They speak of transformation, of teaching moments, of the power of forgiveness. They have requested leniency." The protesters outside grew louder. Judge Matthews frowned at the windows before continuing, "Nevertheless, actions must have consequences. Marcus Drake, this court sentences you to 6 months in prison, suspended for 2 years, 200 hours of community service at approved animal welfare organizations, mandatory alcohol rehabilitation program, compensation payments to all affected parties, a 5-year ban from approaching within 100 meters of any Royal Guard or police service animal, except during your approved educational appearances." Marcus blinked. "Educational appearances?" "Yes." The judge's expression softened slightly. "The Royal Guard has proposed, and this court agrees, that your story could serve a greater purpose. You will participate in their public education program, sharing your experience to prevent others from making similar mistakes." The courtroom buzzed with whispers. It was an unusual sentence, a blend of punishment and opportunity. "Mr. Drake," Judge Matthews leaned forward, "Titan offered you grace. This court offers you a chance to prove worthy of it. Do not waste either." Outside, after the proceedings, reporters swarmed, but it was Captain Stewart who reached him first, pressing something into his hand. "A photograph of Titan. Your first educational talk is next month," Stewart said quietly, "at the Royal Guard Training Academy. Don't tell them what happened. Tell them what you learned." Marcus stared at the photo, at those knowing eyes that had seen through his drunken bravado to something worth saving. His fingers trembled as he carefully tucked it into his jacket pocket, right over his healing ribs. The protesters had fallen silent, watching the exchange. One by one, they lowered their signs. Something in Marcus's face, the shame, the gratitude, the determination to do better, reached them in a way no legal punishment could. His mother took his arm as they left the courthouse. "It's a second chance, love," she whispered. "What will you do with it?" Marcus touched the photo in his pocket, feeling the weight of titanium plates and newfound purpose. "Something worthy," he replied. "Something worthy of Titan's forgiveness." The stables at Hope Valley Animal Sanctuary smelled of hay and redemption. 1 month into his community service, Marcus stood in a stall, pitchfork in hand, his healing ribs protesting each movement. The sanctuary had taken him on despite, or perhaps because of, his infamous history. "You're favoring your right side again," Sarah, the head trainer, called out. She'd been watching him like a hawk since day one. "Those ribs won't heal properly if you don't maintain proper form." Marcus adjusted his stance, remembering his physiotherapist's instructions. The morning sun streamed through the stable windows, highlighting the scars from his surgery. They were still angry red, a roadmap of consequences etched into his flesh. "Got something special for you today," Sarah said, gesturing for him to follow. "Think you're ready for it." They walked past stalls housing rescued horses, victims of neglect, abuse, or abandonment. Marcus had learned each of their names, each of their stories. Some days, looking into their wary eyes, he saw reflections of his own past foolishness. Sarah stopped at the last stall. Inside stood a small, nervous mare with a badly healed burn scar across her flank. "This is Hope," she said quietly. Someone thought it would be funny to throw fireworks at her during Guy Fawkes night. Sound familiar? Marcus's chest tightened. not from physical pain this time. The mare watched him with frightened eyes, pressing herself against the far wall. "I'm not asking you to ride her," Sarah continued. "Just sit with her, talk to her, show her that humans with lighters aren't always monsters." His hand instinctively went to his jacket pocket, where he still carried the photo of Titan. "What if I make it worse?" That's the thing about rock bottom, Marcus. Once you've hit it, the only way left is up. For the next hour, Marcus sat on a hay bale outside Hope's stall, talking softly. He told her about Titan, about his mistake, about the titanium holding his chest together. The mare's ears flicked back and forth, listening. "I thought I was being brave," he told her, voice cracking. "Thought I was proving something. But real bravery is what you show every day, giving humans another chance after what they did to you." By the end of his shift, Hope had taken 3 steps closer to the stall door. That evening, Marcus sat at his mother's kitchen table, working on the speech for his upcoming educational talk. Newspaper clippings covered the surface, not just of his incident, but of other attacks on service animals. Each one felt like a punch to his healing ribs. His phone buzzed. A message from Captain Stewart. "Tomorrow, training academy, 900 hours. Bring yourself, your story, and your honesty." The Royal Guard Training Academy loomed gray and imposing in the morning light. Marcus stood before a room of fresh recruits, their faces a mix of recognition and judgment. His palms were sweating, but he forced himself to meet their eyes. "You all know who I am," he began. "You've seen the video, probably laughed at it, shared it, used it as an example of what not to do. But today, I want to tell you about what you didn't see in that viral clip." He pulled out Titan's photo, held it up. "You saw a drunk fool trying to hurt a horse. You saw karma delivered by a perfectly aimed hoof. What you didn't see was the moment, lying on those cobblestones, when I realized how far I'd fallen. Or the weeks of pain that followed, not just physical pain, but the agony of watching my mother weep as she mortgaged her home to pay my legal fees." The room was silent now, all judgment replaced by attention. "Yesterday at my community service, I met a horse named Hope. Someone had hurt her for fun, just like I tried to hurt Titan. The difference is, Titan was trained to defend himself. Hope wasn't. But here's the extraordinary thing. Despite everything humans did to her, she's learning to trust again." His voice grew stronger, fueled by conviction born of hard-learned lessons. "Your service animals aren't just tools or weapons, they're partners, teachers. Sometimes, like in my case, they're even agents of redemption. Titan could have killed me that day. Instead, he gave me exactly what I needed. A wake-up call that shattered not just my ribs, but my entire worldview." In the back of the room, Captain Stewart nodded slowly, a glimmer of approval in his eyes. "When you put on that uniform," Marcus continued, touching his chest where the titanium plates lay beneath, "you become guardians not just of tradition or ceremony, but of trust. The trust between human and animal. The trust that lets a horse like Hope heal, or a horse like Titan stand calm in the face of idiots like me." One of the recruits raised a hand. "Does it still hurt? Your ribs?" Marcus smiled grimly. "Every day. But I've learned to be grateful for the pain. It reminds me of who I was, who I am now, and most importantly, who I'm trying to become." The photo of Titan seemed to watch over the room, those knowing eyes a testament to the strange paths redemption sometimes takes. The classroom fell silent as the viral video played on the screen. Not the original incident, but Marcus's encounter with Hope at the sanctuary. 3 months into his community service, someone had captured the moment the burned mare finally ate from his hand. The clip had gone viral for entirely different reasons than his first brush with internet fame. From viral villain to animal whisperer, the morning show host said, as Marcus sat uncomfortably in the studio chair. "Your story has inspired thousands. How does it feel?" Marcus shifted, his ribs still tender despite the months of healing. "It feels undeserved," he admitted. "I'm just trying to make up for my mistakes." The producers had wanted him to wear a suit, but he'd come in his sanctuary work clothes, hay still clinging to his boots. Hope's trust had been hard-won. He wouldn't miss their morning session for anything, not even national television. "We have a surprise for you," the host smiled. "Captain Stewart is joining us via video link." The captain's familiar face appeared on the screen, Titan visible in the background. "Mr. Drake's transformation has exceeded all expectations," Stewart said formally. "The educational program has seen a 300% increase in engagement since he began sharing his story. But more importantly, reports of harassment of service animals have dropped significantly in areas where he's spoken." The numbers appeared on screen. Incidents down 70%, public awareness up 85%. A new social media challenge had teenagers posting photos of themselves respectfully admiring service animals from a proper distance. Titan's law had passed through Parliament with unprecedented support. The legislation now carried strict penalties for harassing service animals, but also included funding for educational programs. Marcus's story had become its cornerstone. Back at the sanctuary that afternoon, Marcus led a group of at-risk teens through the stables. These were kids one bad decision away from their own viral infamy. He saw his former self in their tough facades. "This is Hope," he said, approaching the mare's stall. She nickered softly in greeting, pressing her scarred face against his shoulder. The teen's expressions shifted from boredom to surprise. Word of warning. He lifted his shirt, showing the surgical scars. "This is what happens when you mess with horses. But these scars, they're nothing compared to what Hope carries. The difference is, I earned mine through stupidity. She got hers through human cruelty." One girl, heavy eyeliner and practiced sneer, stepped forward. Can I touch her?" "Ask her properly," Marcus instructed. "Show her respect. Let her decide." The girl's hand trembled as Hope sniffed it carefully before allowing a gentle touch. Tears smudged the dark makeup. "Someone really hurt her? On purpose?" "Just like I tried to hurt Titan," Marcus said quietly. "The difference is, I got a second chance to be better. Now I'm trying to help Hope give humans a second chance too." His phone buzzed. Another notification. The sanctuary's donation page had exploded after the morning show. Hope's fund for rehabilitating abused horses had exceeded its yearly goal in hours. Sarah appeared at his elbow. "Your mother's here," she said softly. "And you've got a special visitor." In the sanctuary's main yard, his mother stood beaming. Beside her, Captain Stewart sat astride Titan, the horse's coat gleaming in the afternoon sun. The teens gasped, phones coming out instinctively before they remembered Marcus's lessons about respecting service animals. "The Royal Guard is considering a partnership with the sanctuary," Stewart announced. "A program for retiring service horses and education for the public. We'd like you to help develop it, Mr. Drake." Marcus stared, speechless. Behind him, Hope stuck her head over her stall door, curious about the new arrival. Titan turned to look at her, his calm gaze seeming to convey understanding across the species barrier. "6 months ago, I was a drunk idiot with a lighter," Marcus said finally. "Why trust me with something this important?" "Because," Stewart dismounted, leading Titan closer. "Sometimes the best teachers are those who learned their lessons the hard way." The teens watched in awe as Titan lowered his head in greeting to Hope. The mare, usually so skittish around new horses, remained calm. Perhaps she sensed something in the Royal Guard horse, the same capacity for forgiveness that had changed Marcus's life. One of the boys, trying to maintain his tough image, cleared his throat. "So this is what you do now, instead of whatever you did before." Marcus touched the photo of Titan he still carried everywhere, then looked at Hope, at the teens, at his mother's proud tears, at Captain Stewart's approving nod. "No," he said. "This is who I am now. Sometimes it takes a hard kick to point you in the right direction." The Royal Guard Museum's new wing gleamed under spotlights. 1 year after the incident that changed his life, Marcus stood before a display case containing a simple cigarette lighter, his lighter, alongside photographs documenting what the media now called the Titan effect. Quite something, isn't it? Captain Stewart appeared beside him, dress uniform immaculate. From evidence of crime to museum piece, rather like your transformation, the exhibition titled Partners in Service, the bond between guards and horses, had drawn record crowds. Marcus's story occupied a central space, but not just the moment of infamy. The display showed everything that came after: the sanctuary work, the educational programs, the lives changed. First groups arriving, Sarah called from the entrance. She'd taken a day off from the sanctuary to be here. Hope was doing well enough now to handle a day without their usual session. A class of primary school students filed in, their eyes wide at the grandeur of the Royal Guard Museum. They gathered around Marcus, who no longer needed to lean on his podium to support his healing ribs. "Who here has seen the video?" he asked. Every hand shut up. "Right. But today I'm going to show you what happened after the kick, because sometimes the worst moment of your life can lead to the best changes if you learn from it." The children sat cross-legged on the floor as Marcus walked them through the exhibition. Their teachers watched in amazement as the formerly rowdy class hung on every word. "And this," he said, reaching the final display, "is the newest addition to our team." The wall-sized photo showed Hope in her new role at the sanctuary's rehabilitation program. The mare who once feared all human contact now helped traumatized children find their courage. Her burned face and Marcus's scarred chest had become symbols of healing. "Miss," a small girl raised her hand. "Did it hurt when the horse kicked you?" Marcus knelt carefully beside her. "More than anything, but do you know what hurt more? Knowing I'd tried to scare an animal that protects people. That's why I work every day to make it right." His phone buzzed. Another notification about Titan's Law. The legislation had spread beyond the UK. Other countries were adopting similar measures, often named after their own service animals. A global movement born from one drunken mistake and a horse's perfectly aimed kick. Captain Stewart cleared his throat. "Time for the main event, Mr. Drake." The museum's central courtyard had been transformed. Reporters and cameras lined the edges as Marcus took his position. A year ago, he'd stood before cameras to apologize. Today, he stood to celebrate. Titan entered first, coat gleaming, Stewart at his reins. The crowd applauded, phones raised to capture the moment. Then, to everyone's surprise, a second horse appeared. Hope walked steadily beside Sarah, her burned face held high. The mare who once hid from all contact now carried herself with quiet dignity. She'd come far from the terrified creature in the sanctuary's back stall. "Ladies and gentlemen," Marcus addressed the crowd, his voice strong and clear. "A year ago, I thought I knew what strength looked like. I thought it meant being tough, being feared. Then a horse taught me that true strength lies in knowing when to strike and when to show mercy." He gestured to Titan. "This magnificent animal could have killed me. Instead, he gave me exactly what I needed, a wake-up call that shattered more than just my ribs. He broke through years of foolish pride and showed me a better path." Hope nickered softly, drawing smiles from the crowd. "And this brave mare," Marcus continued, "taught me that healing is possible, even from the deepest wounds. Together, they represent everything our new partnership program stands for: protection and rehabilitation, strength and compassion." The cameras flashed as Titan and Hope stood side by side. the Royal Guard's mighty warrior and the Sanctuary's gentle healer. Different paths, different purposes, but united in their ability to change lives. The Royal Guard and Hope Valley Sanctuary are proud to announce the official launch of Second Chances, a program that will rehabilitate retired service horses while helping troubled youth find their way. Because everyone, human or horse, deserves the opportunity to rewrite their story. In the front row, Marcus's mother wiped away tears. Beside her, Linda Harrison, the lawyer who'd helped navigate his transformation from defendant to program director, nodded in approval. The titanium plates in Marcus's chest caught the sunlight as he moved to stand between the two horses. One had kicked him into a new life. The other had shown him what to do with it. Together, they'd helped him transform a viral moment of shame into a legacy of hope. 5 years after the kick that changed everything, Marcus stood in the Royal Plaza's cobblestone square, exactly where he'd fallen that fateful morning. The weather was eerily similar. Crisp autumn air, morning sun painting the stones gold. But everything else had changed. Gone was the drunk troublemaker with a lighter and something to prove. In his place stood the director of the UK's most successful animal-assisted rehabilitation program. His chest still ached in cold weather where the titanium plates held him together, but he'd learned to embrace the pain as a reminder. Ready for this? Captain Stewart, now his close friend and colleague, asked quietly. Marcus nodded, watching as the crowd gathered. They weren't here by accident. This was the 5-year anniversary of Titan's Law and the launch of something new. The clip played on the massive screen mounted above the plaza. Not the original viral video of his mistake, but a montage of what came after. Hope helping traumatized children find their voice. Retired service horses giving troubled teens a second chance. Marcus speaking at schools and prisons, showing his scars and sharing his story. Then Titan appeared, drawing gasps from the crowd. The mighty horse had aged gracefully, his black coat now dusted with gray. Today would be his final public appearance before retirement. He'd earned his rest. When I stood here 5 years ago, Marcus addressed the gathering, his voice carrying across the hushed plaza. I was a different man. I thought this square would only ever remind me of my greatest shame. Instead, it became the foundation of my greatest purpose. He gestured to the line of mounted royal guards along the plaza's edge. Since the passing of Titan's Law, attacks on service animals have dropped by 90% worldwide. Our Second Chances program has helped over 1,000 troubled youth find their way. And today we're taking it one step further. Hope emerged from the crowd, her burned face now a badge of triumph rather than tragedy. The mare walked steadily to Marcus's side, no longer the terrified creature he'd met in that back stall. On her back sat Amy, the teenage girl with heavy eyeliner who'd been among his first group of troubled youth. Now she was the Sanctuary's youngest qualified trainer. The Royal Guard and Hope Valley Sanctuary are proud to announce the Titan Trust. Marcus continued. A global foundation dedicated to protecting service animals and rehabilitating both horses and humans who need a second chance. Because one horse's mercy taught me that everyone deserves the opportunity to rewrite their story. The crowd erupted in applause as Titan stepped forward one last time. The great horse touched his nose gently to Hope's scarred face. Warrior and healer, strength and compassion meeting in perfect understanding. Marcus's hand went to his chest, feeling the familiar ridges of surgical scars beneath his shirt. He still carried Titan's photo everywhere he went, though the edges were worn smooth now from years of handling. But today, he took it out and walked to the museum's new digital archive station. This photo reminded me every day of who I was and who I wanted to become, he said, placing it in the scanner. Now it belongs to history, along with the lighter that started it all. But the lesson, that's something I'll carry forever. The image appeared on screens around the plaza, Titan's knowing eyes looking out at a world he'd helped change, one kick at a time. Amy dismounted Hope and joined Marcus at the podium. "Tell them what you told me that first day," she said, her former sneer replaced by a confident smile. "About rock bottom." Marcus looked out at the crowd, at the horses, at the cobblestones that had once held his broken body. "Rock bottom," he said clearly, "is just a solid foundation if you know how to build on it. All it takes is the courage to get back up, the humility to learn, and sometimes it takes a horse who knows exactly when to strike and when to forgive." As if on cue, Titan raised his proud head and let out a resonant neigh that echoed across the plaza. Hope answered, their voices blending in a sound that spoke of endings and beginnings, of wounds healed and lessons learned. The morning sun caught the tears in Marcus's eyes as he faced the spot where he'd fallen 5 years ago. But this time he wasn't looking back in shame. He was looking forward, toward a future built on the most unlikely of foundations, a drunk's foolish challenge and a horse's perfect aim. In the end, his viral moment of shame had become something far more powerful, proof that even the worst mistakes can lead to the best changes if you're brave enough to learn from them. And as Titan stood proud in his final public appearance, his gray-flecked coat shining in the morning sun, Marcus finally understood that sometimes rock bottom is just where your real story begins.